welcome back to part 3 of The Long Hot Marriage. And I'm here with Todd Creager, who's the author of this book. It's a powerful self-help book to get your marriage back on track. And I'm going to let Todd tell you more about that. But first, I wanted to ask you a question, Todd. So this whole thing of you said mostly it's women that bring their husbands, that drag the husbands in, but there's some men that do initiate coming to therapy because they're concerned about their relationship. What are those guys like? And where do I find them?
Well, you know, the truth is that I've seen over the 27 years or so I've been practicing, more and more men are the ones initiating. I mean, maybe they're still the minority, but it's a growing minority. And you know, you could call it the Cosmo Emotional Man, who is able to be in touch with his feelings, and maybe he's had parents that were more progressive too, so he got more in touch with his feelings, and sometimes he might be with the woman who's less in touch with her feelings. So I've seen those kinds of role reversals, and in these cases you have to do the way you would do it when it's the typical way, and I think I'm seeing more and more of those kinds of situations.
Okay, so they're kind of the cosmopolitan guy, huh?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So these relationships, well, I'm going to talk about sex. I do want to talk about sex. So these guys that are initiating it, is it usually because they're dissatisfied with the quality or quantity of sex or what's going on in the bedroom?
You know, there's two main reasons why men will call me. One is that they haven't had sex with their wives in way too long and they can't take it anymore. And the other is they've been caught in an affair. So those are the two, probably most common reasons men will call, because they're panicked with the second one. And the first one, they're just so frustrated they don't know what else to do, and they hope therapy will help.
And in avoiding pain, they go to an affair.
Yes.
They go outside of the marriage.
Yes.
Okay. I still want to talk about sex. So do you talk about in the book what makes a great lover, what keeps a marriage alive in the bedroom?
Oh, absolutely. It's a major part of the book. I really believe that a lot of what happens in the bedroom has a lot to do with what's out of the bedroom. I always say foreplay starts when you wake up in the morning, and that's how you look at your wife or your husband. That's how you talk to them. But of course, that proceeds into the bedroom, and it's very important to really decide to be a great lover. And being a great lover, like some of the things we've talked about, isn't something we just learn, because being a great lover isn't something you get by reading some great book on techniques. Now, this book is not a book on techniques. When you get the book, The Long Hot Marriage, you'll find that it gives you real information that really lasts, information that really works for both people. And even though having techniques isn't a bad thing, that's not what makes a great lover.
But no, it sounds like, from what you had said before, that it's the actual connection between the two people. And not to, give the milk away without buying the cow, but what are a couple of little pointers, or what are a couple points about making yourself a good lover?
But one of the most important things about being a lover is you have to realize that being a good lover requires creating some intensity with your partner. A lot of relationships that have their passion has alleviated, they don't have that intensity that they did when they first met. You know how that is when you first meet? It's really intense. And so what we have to do is create that intensity. So one way to create intensity, honestly, I mean, specific little things. It's like looking at your partner longingly, sending them a very sexy text. Those kinds of things that we could do, just the little things that begin, again, that's the foreplay. That's the foreplay. You could be at a meeting and say to your wife, I really think your body is phenomenal. Okay, that's the beginning of foreplay. So you want to create that intensity. And of course, when you're with the person, it's very important to touch in ways that create intensity. A lot of couples, they touch in the same way they touched before. If they touch fast, they need to learn how to touch slower and softer. Typically, people, they have sex the way they do the rest of their life. They're very protected, very, very self-protected. And they don't, sex is a tricky area. It's an area where you're really exposed, and a lot of people feel very self-conscious. They don't want to They don't want to be judged. They don't want to lose. They don't want to be ashamed. They don't want to be humiliated. So they stop taking chances. And so they lose that intensity. So being a great lover requires courage, and it requires being emotionally present with your partner. It requires looking right at your partner, and you know, I can't tell you how many couples have a hard time looking at their partners in my office. They've been married 25 years. I tell them to look at each other, and they burst up laughing after 2 seconds because they're not used to that kind of intensity. So being a lover requires creating that intensity between two people. The way you look at each other, the way you touch, okay, and that's the beginning, creating that intensity.
So you're actually having to risk giving up something that's comfortable to you, like an old way, or
Yes.
or you know, you've just been married for so long that you've taken so many things for granted. Is that what
Yes.
you're talking about? You're talking about
Yes.
risk?
Yes, we have to risk. I mean, there's many ways to risk in the bedroom. I mean, one way to risk is to play on different roles and different characters. If you tend to be the one that initiates, maybe the other person needs to initiate. If you tend to be the touching gently, maybe you need to be more aggressive. And maybe it feels out of character, but maybe that's something that's missing in the relationship. So you always want to play with you want to be playful. You know, the bedroom is a place to play. It's like little kids when they're pretending. You know, we got to pretend in the bedroom. We got to play. We got to explore new ways of talking and new ways of being. And I always say to couples, if you feel awkward, you're on the right. You're in the right place there. You're on the right path. So you need to get to that place of awkwardness, which seems kind of funny when you've been married for several decades or 6 years or whatever it is, and then you need to get to that point where you feel awkward with each other. So touching, kissing, licking in different places. Hugging in a different way, asking the person, you know, what is something else I could do that I've never done with you before? Asking for what that person's secret sexual fantasy is. I mean, couples don't talk about sex. Many of them don't. So, some do, most don't. And they just try to keep it safe because it's very risky. And especially if you have someone who's kind of inhibited sexually, that usually that person runs the show and the other person keeps on holding back, and that creates a lot of frustration. I'd rather people just go for it and try to take some risks, and they do it as a team. You know, they do it as a team, and they help each other out. And the whole purpose is to explore new ways of being with each other, sexually, sensually.
So communication, it really does start with communication. And so what happens though if you've got two people that seem to be on very different, I mean, you said awkward, if you're on the right track if it's awkward.
Yes.
But do you ever find that sometimes people are just really have different proclivities when it comes to sex, and is that necessarily a deal breaker?
Most of the time not. Most of the time not. I'm not going to speak in absolutes, but most of the time not. I think one of the things that we have to do is tolerate each other's differences and oftentimes be excited. Like, let's say one person is inhibited in some way sexually, that the other partner can be grateful and appreciative for every little change that person makes. I mean, I would say it's probably more exciting for a and I've seen this happen actually. I mean, that's pretty good news here, because I've seen, thinking of several couples I've worked with where the husband had a wife who's very inhibited, and she started to do just some little thing different, and he reacted like she was like the sexiest, amazing thing of all time, because it was so different for him in their relationship.
So you really do eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Exactly. Well said. Well said.
Well, we're going to go to part 4 here shortly, so I hope you come back and join us. And thank you again so much for joining us for The Long Hot Marriage. Check us out part 4.